Welcome back, Curious Hearts. I'm Vera. Together, in every episode, we get to explore what it is we really believe, how we practice, and we get to meet people who are on their own spiritual path. Together, we begin. Hi, welcome back, Curious Hearts. I'm really excited to be talking to my friend Renee Blanchard today. Renee is a really interesting and inspiring professional woman, in my opinion. I first became aware of her probably over a decade ago because I walked into this cute little coffee shop down the street from my office called Church Alley, and it was really clear to me that it was different than other coffee shops I had been in. There was just something about the vibe of the place. And so I followed Church Alley for years and like over time eventually met Renee. And I really am inspired by the transition that she's making now and like how I think brave it can be to, start a new path, you know, not as a young, it's like you went back to school when you were what, in your
40, yeah.
40s? And like, yeah. And like what a how I don't know, I like we said sort of before we started recording, like I think that you are in this really extraordinary transition right now, like that has a lot of richness around the spiritual practice. So,
Thanks.
welcome. I'm so glad you're
Thank
here.
you. Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had Church Alley. I opened in 2012 and I just closed it last November of 2024. So almost a little, or I guess, yeah, about 12 years. And I was absolutely ready to make that transition to close the shop. It had taken me years to be able to make that decision. And then when the lease was up and the loans were paid off, and I was just like, okay, this is it. We got to go now. So, and then it's been like this ride in the last 6 months, 8 months, I guess now, to like figure out what is happening, what these next things. And I had gone to school, gone back to school to become a dietitian, and I'm still in my master's program to continue that education. But now I'm working in this big corporation, like still doing customer service, which is like, if I were to like look at the threads of my career from when I was 20 to now to 45, like it's that customer service aspect, that being of service in whatever role. I'll pretty much always worked in restaurants and nonprofits. So this is actually a new experience to be in a corporate setting, but it's like a customer service, customer facing type of experience as well. So it's still this like, I'm still like pushing on like the different pedals of like how to navigate all these different human experiences that are coming at me. and I'm
Yes.
having to like navigate them through it through this experience.
Yeah. And I don't want to foreshadow maybe what we'll talk about later, but I think about that as service is one of the entry points, I think, to like a really deep spiritual life. Um, So that let me transition. I like to always begin just by asking like what was your childhood like when it came to your religious or spiritual practice? Like did you guys have you know, did you have a regular church practice? Did you like talk about God or anything like that in your family?
So, as a family, we did not. As like a culture of people born in southern Louisiana, there was definitely expectation, and as Catholics, there was definitely expectations of things that we had to fulfill, right? So, like, I got confirmed. I was baptized. I got confirmed. I went to CDC because I didn't go to I went to a Catholic school up until like third grade, and then I went to a public school, and so I had to go to CDC after school type of religious um, classes. And my parents were both raised in extremely religious families. So both of those grandparents' homes, aunts and uncles' homes are all very, very religious, but our home was not. And my parents really rebelled against Catholicism and any kind of religion.
Hmm.
completely, but had these like interesting places because where religion and God came back up. Even in my father's bedroom where he passed a few years ago, he had crucifixes up. He had a number of them, and there were his
Wow.
parents. Yeah, we found a number of crucifixes and Bibles. Um, and from I have his childhood Bible. I found it in his bookcase, and so I kept that. But he was very against religion, like really, really rebelled against it. And so,
Isn't that
mhm,
interesting, right? That he would then keep all that
mhm.
stuff.
And the same thing when my
I mean, I guess they become sort of
yeah,
personal
yeah. I
relics,
think maybe
right?
it was
But
this memory of these people, who were in his life maybe at some point. I don't know. I actually have no idea. I'm assuming, but I don't have that. And then my mom, after she had had a stroke, she had to gain back a lot of mobility and speech and all of the things, brain function, all these things that she did on her own to be able to live her life again. And she went back to religion, even after, she had her stroke when she was 46. So it had been like 2.5 decades of rebelling against this religion, and then came back to it. And
and she went back to
yeah,
Catholicism.
and then yeah, but she didn't go to
Okay.
church, but she watched TV church. She on Sunday, so on the weekends she would watch church on TV. That was like what she did.
I love this is like for somebody who like I did not grow up in a religious family. I was like, wait, TV church like I mean, I knew there was like WLAE.
Yeah, I guess
I,
on
I'm
cable.
curious, like yeah, like as a side note, like what? Because I mean, you grew up in South Louisiana, and your family, I mean, like you've got a Cajun
Yeah.
name, right? Like what? Is there anything that makes like South Louisiana Catholicism different? Or like what is the flavor of the Catholicism of your
I think
family?
it's very traditional. It's like almost where you would see in Latin America. I think there's a lot of similarities of what that looks like. It's like very traditional Catholicism. Um, you said All Father. There, like my aunt had kneeling, like those kneeling stools in their bedrooms so they could
Hmm.
pray in like with the Bible in front of them and the rosary, and we would listen to the rosary all the time. So
Wow.
so I grew up hearing the rosary being prayed a lot. That was just kind of, in rooms and cars and radio on like all kinds of things.
Just like
Yeah,
all the
just like,
time.
and that is
Yeah.
very South Louisiana Cajun, is saying the rosary often. So that's what it's like. It seems like very Latin American, or like even in Eastern Europe, that is done a lot. When you go to churches in Eastern Europe, there's just older women saying the rosary all day. It's constant. Um,
It reminds me of like
oh
mantra,
yeah,
right? Or
yeah,
even or like when you go into some like traditional Hindu temples or things like that and
yes,
like there it's the same thing. It's like there's someone in the corner like chanting the
yes,
Vedas,
yeah,
right? And they just that's what they do
yeah.
all day, every day.
In India, when I spent some time, we were able to go into some of the temples, and in Thailand and some of the different temples. It's the same. It feels very, very similar. Yeah, absolutely.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
So that's the environment. So you grew up like came from like a really I mean, would you call it a devout Catholic family? But
But
then,
not
like,
my nuclear.
extended
Yeah.
family. But then, yeah, but then your nuclear family is sort of
But
rebellious.
I wanted,
How did
yeah.
that?
Well, I wanted to go
Yeah,
to church
like, how
every
did that
Sunday.
impact you?
I would have my parents drop me off at church sometimes. They would leave.
Do you think that was like your rebellion against them, or do you think that
I
you had that connection
I
really
think
early?
a few things. I don't think that I rebelled against my nuclear family, honestly. But I think that I'm incredibly curious. Like I want to understand things. Like I'm as curious about, I wanted to understand why did all these other people we knew do go to church. And I feel very comfortable in a Catholic mass. Like it's very relaxing to me. And so there is something,
Me
yeah,
too.
it's something like,
Which I have always found when I went away, I mean, right, I was not baptized, but when I went away to college, I would go to Catholic Mass when I was
yeah,
homesick because it just felt like New Orleans.
it's
So
feels comfortable.
it's wild.
Yeah, I know. When I traveled, I've traveled a lot alone to many countries, and like I always go to mass to church Catholic churches to like get some anchoring as
Hmm.
I'm traveling these different places, you know. Um, but yeah,
Hmm.
and then I just like I like being outside. I like to be with animals and plants and explore and like hiking and like that's some and so to me like to me that's God, you know, seeing the colors of a mountain or animals I've never seen before, animals interact or whatever. Like that is this witnessing God, you know. And that's I think where
Yeah.
my environmental.
And I think about, yeah, I want to talk about that in just a second. It makes me think too about like that curiosity is almost like sort of a God-given drive towards
Mhm.
that, right? It's like that like curiosity is sort of like a longing,
Mhm. Mhm.
right? To be closer, to know, right? So yeah, as an adult, like how has that, do you still feel like that? Obviously, like you go to church when you're traveling. Do you still find yourself going to church now? Like what is your spiritual life as an adult?
I don't go to church. I have always worked on Sundays. I've always worked in times where there are masses, right? So like cuz I've worked in restaurants my whole
Right.
life. And so
Yeah, so Saturday night and Sunday morning are
yeah.
out. And 7 a.m. mass is
No.
certainly not going to
No, like
happen.
there's no so I've never had the
No way.
opportunity and so I have built those practices in, you know, my day. You know, this is not true for my whole adulthood, but maybe in the last 20 years, you know, I pray every day. I pray twice a day, sometimes more than twice a day, sometimes in the middle of the day as well. But I pray when I wake up and I pray as I fall asleep. And then sometimes in the middle of the day, there's also some quiet, you know, time that I do that as well.
Hmm.
So it is like those things are still a big part. They are a part of my life. It just maybe doesn't look. I'm not, a, and I think of, and I am Catholic. You know, like I feel an affinity to the Catholicism, and now as I read and learn more and evolve as a person, as an adult, is like Jesuit, this more Jesuit and system, like this like
Mm,
view of we are here in service, and I feel that very strongly about my life. Like I'm of service, and that's what I do throughout the day and at home. And so yeah, so that's like as I listen more, read more, that's kind of where I am.
yeah. You, I cut you short a second ago about your connection to environmentalism and how you feel like, nature, animals, or God. Like, will you share a little bit about your environmental work too? Because, yeah, I think a lot of people probably don't know that about you.
Yeah, so I definitely like am an environmentalist as a little kid as well. Though I didn't understand that that was what I was doing. And I worked for Greenpeace for a long time, and I've worked for Rainforest Action Network. Though now it's called a Stand, and other environmental health issues on um, like public health as it relates to what we're doing to the environment, how it's impacting people's health and community health and children's health. And that is just like so I I think that environmentalism is like such an easy bridge across like religion, across political, you know, because we talk about, right? The very first thing we talk about in religion or in the Bible or any of these things is that God made this planet and now we take care of it and we take care of each other. And so it's just like this very easy place, you know, to witness God, but to
Yeah.
witness people who we don't aren't supposed to get along with or don't. get along with, right? Because we are sharing these very basic things together. And that has been it. When I talk to people, when I've been in communities with people who would never have a conversation with an environmentalist, it is the environment, it is the earth that we have the most connections towards each other with.
Is there something like, do you have a specific memory about something like that? About like,
Well, I've also
I mean, I don't know how, yeah, go ahead.
when I say that I worked for Greenpeace, I did paperwork. I did email, click clacked, and sent off emails. That was part of my job. but I also climbed smokestack. I also did protests. So I climbed a smokestack in Western Pennsylvania. That was the company Allegheny Power was being sued by multiple states on the eastern seaboard because they could track asthma rates and pollution to this company and to Pennsylvania. So all of the states that they won, they ended up tearing down not too long ago. They closed the plant and tore it all down. So, but in the process before all that happened, we had climbed this plant to bring attention to these lawsuits. This is during the second Bush administration. And
yeah,
we were arrested by everyone that could arrest someone. And the first people charged under the Patriot Act by the federal government.
Really? I didn't know that.
For destruction of an energy facility. Because this is right after 9/11, not too long after 9/11, in 2004. And so we were one of the first people ever arrested on the Patriot Act. We made the Bush's security briefing in the morning. So George Bush heard my name in the Oval Office as one of the people climbing. So then we were faced with 94 years in prison. That was our initial charges.
Holy shit, Renee!
Yeah, we got arrested by the local authorities and then the FBI, and so we spent 24 hours in FBI custody or something like that. And so we had to go back to because we were facing, and we did a PR tour basically of Pennsylvania to talk to people and to gather and to get some goodwill. We knew we had goodwill in the area, but we needed to really show that. And so when we were out there afterwards, in the months after, talking to people, we would hold meet and greets around the area. And so people from the community would come and talk to us. People who worked at the plant. One guy, this older man came, he worked on a power plant his entire life. And he's like, I just want to meet, I heard there were women that went up there. I just wanted to meet one of these women. Who were these? And I was like, it was me. And so he's like, and he shook my hand. He was a rough man. You know what I mean? He spent his whole life. We definitely did not have much in common except for this specific experience of being some of the only people on the planet that had climbed this very smokestack. And he's like, I climbed that almost every day for whatever, a decade, 2 decades, something like that. And he's like, you're the first, there were 3 women, or 4 women. So he's like, you're one of only 4 women that's ever climbed these smokestacks before. And he was like, and I agree with you, and he was like, it should be shut down.
Wow.
And he's like, people are sick. And never in a million years would I have interacted with this man anywhere where we could have agreed with so much, so profoundly, except in the protection of each other and the environment and this, and this beautiful river the Allegheny River that goes through, and the beautiful Pennsylvania, forests and mountains and all of this.
Yeah, stuff. That landscape is gorgeous. And really, the Allegheny Mountains are really unlike any other range. Yeah. It reminds me, it's so funny because that makes me think so much about New Orleans and about South Louisiana and things like the Shrimp and Petroleum Festival, right? Which when you tell somebody out of Louisiana that that's a real thing, they think you're making it up.
Yeah.
But how complicated the BP oil spill was, because, people from the same family, you know, half of them are working in the oil and gas industry and half of them are fishermen. And so they don't see those two things as
No.
separate.
No.
And of course, like the volume of health impact of industry in South Louisiana is unbelievably profound.
I mean, just in my immediate friend group and family, the number of people who have cancer or some kind of illness that is contributing, that the environmental pollution contributes to. And like, there is such, we have to like, down here to make money, we kind of have to put our brain on a shelf and then do something else, right? Because the same family members that lived offshore when they were in their 20s on these rigs are hunters and fishermen and make the best deer sausage, you know, like, and the best chefs, and like, obviously, and are extremely religious, very devout to God and Jesus, these people or these things that they just live their life for, and then have to like separate out in order to make a good living here, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I also think about it like a couple of things. One is like the decision between short-term survival and like long-term thriving, right? And that if you can't pay your rent, like if you can't feed your family in this month, like it doesn't necessarily, like the risk of getting cancer in 20 years is not more urgent, you know? And that often, I mean, I wonder how much, you know, that devotion is actually a tool for navigating that. You know, it's like that it's not, you know, that God is not separate from all of that stuff, but instead like God is a necessary partner, right? In making those decisions, in, you know, asking for protection, all of that.
I think there's like a few things like kind of come up for me, and that is one, that a lot the negatives and the bad things and the bad reputation of the Catholic Church is this man-made path, right, of Catholicism, right, which is about colonialism. It's about power. It's not about God, right? There's a lot of them. And that, and then the other side, right, next to it is that life is really, really hard and really painful and really chaotic. And that's just true. That's like a neutral, right? Yeah. Like that's just true.
That's just a statement.
That's just true.
Yeah, it's true. It's like, it's also like life is also really beautiful and magical and extraordinary and ecstatic, right? It's the same. It's like those things are just true statements.
And so, but we need some, and I think that's true. I don't think I thought that at 20 years old, but I think at 45 years old, we need something to help us navigate how endlessly difficult life is, right? Like, and I would go on to say, like, if we are someone who does not believe that life is really painful and chaotic and difficult, then you are in an incredibly privileged place that the vast majority of the world does not exist in either, right? Like, just be...
Yeah, either incredibly privileged or in incredible denial
right.
or both.
Yeah, right. And so, like, the other things that happen, like, when I think of, like, where is God? God is, like, shows up in the moments after a parent dies and you're at lunch with other people and you're just laughing over something, the bird singing, or someone called. The next day after my mom died, we went to lunch and everyone was named Kathy, which was yelling out, right? Like, every name yelled out was Kathy, which is my mom's name. We're like, what the hell?
Right.
You know, like, just because, you know, so like, to me, that's just God, right? Like, that's just like our connection to each other or to the universe or those threads that exist everywhere. Like, those are the things that are God. Like, when you're stopped when you're stopped and something just so odd or magical, beautiful, or something happens, like in the midst of anything that's going on, like that is where God is, right? It's, to me, it's not this like
Yeah.
following this parent, this mythical parent where I'm devoted to that parent.
Right.
It's like these big bubbles that pop in front of you that are just like, how, just so beautiful. There are no words to that moment, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Um, I mean, I wanna ask you about like a spiritual principle that is, like, maybe this is the question, right? Like, what is a spiritual principle that is getting you through this stage of your life, right? And I think about a spiritual principle as sort of like a either a belief that we have or like an ethos that we turn to in those moments, right? When things are hard.
I think one thing that there is no certainty. We do not have the answers. We do not know. You can plan all day long and say with as authoritative voice as you want to, but you do not know anything. You do not know what's going to happen.
Stop. I hate it.
Right? And so,
I know.
so to
Yeah.
me, like, as the rug gets pulled out from under me again and again and again and again and again, in every place that I get to, and I don't mean that in like a bad way, though it feels bad a lot of the times, right? I just mean that that's just kind of what happens as if you get to grow older, things change suddenly a bunch of times, right? And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah. Things don't go according to
yeah,
plan. That's just like, that's it. That's
yeah,
life.
that's just
Yeah.
what it is. And so to me, that's kind of like understanding that is more helpful as I get older. That doesn't mean that you
Yeah.
don't get all the things that you want out of your life. It just means that you actually don't know what you want out of your life. Right? And that, not in a bad way, that's just what it is. We don't get to
Yeah.
have the final answer, or the final judgment, the final things. Like, that's where God is. I don't know if that's clear.
Yeah. It's like I think the words I've heard people use to describe that are like mystery, right? But also, I think about that in relation to that nature of curiosity, right? It's like we don't know. And so curiosity is then, when we're young, I think curiosity is about like finding the answers so that we know for
Yeah.
sure. And as we get older, curiosity is more of like this kind of wonder about like, I don't know. Who knows
Well,
what's happening?
well, also,
I wonder what's happening
yeah.
now.
Also, like, I don't think when we are sure, when we are so confident in what's going to happen next, we lose so much um, optimism or creativity. We don't have enough creativity to know what could happen, right? And I will say I'm endlessly optimistic person, and that's where I'm coming. That's where all that is. What I mean when I say that, I feel like someone could say the exact same words that I've been saying and mean it in a pessimistic way, and that's not what I mean. I mean it in this endlessly optimistic way. We don't even know what we're going to get to do, or who we're going to get to meet, or the experiences we're going to get to have. And
Yeah.
that is, I think that's like, for me, I have that because to me that is God, right? Like, that
Yeah.
optimism is God, or like that is the practice that I keep developing, is the letting go of like, it has to look this way, it
Yeah.
has to feel this way.
Yeah, my experience is that once I was able to let go of it has to be this way, and to open up to, okay, I was wrong. I didn't know shit. Where are we going
Yeah.
now? That my life has actually unfolded when I followed that, mystery, curiosity, optimism. My life has unfolded in a way that I never could have imagined or even hoped for. Right? Like if we had told 20-year-old Vera that she would be, I don't even know, my whole life, what I'm doing now, she'd be like, what? Like I don't even think she could not have imagined it, you know. And so being limited, I agree with you, being limited by the way we think things should be is, yeah, that's, I love that uncertainty is the first word. Like nothing is certain, that's where you
Yeah.
started. Because that's, yeah, it's like what, and I think if you said to somebody like, oh, well, one of my core spiritual principles is uncertainty, they'd be like, what?
I think what
Um,
we
but I also like, I love like when you first said to me that you were like a perpetual optimist. I was like, I see that 100%. And I don't think that you could, I don't think you could have the life that you have. I don't think you could have had the shop. I don't think you could have done all of that other stuff without that kind of perpetual optimism.
and yeah, and I
Mm.
think that that's our I'm not saying I'm optimistic or, happy go lucky all the time in
It's not
any
like
way. No,
Pollyanna.
not at all.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
just no, I think just thinking that I don't know what's going to happen. And there's no point in being upset about that. You know. We can
Yeah.
just keep going on the path. And I'm a planner. I'm a
Oh, I
big,
know.
I plan things out. I think things through. I'm very, very thoughtful on how I do things
And very
and very
strategic.
strategic. Yeah. But with the understanding that we really just don't know what's going to happen next, or what is that strategy actually going to look like? What is your work? I love working in restaurants, and because I love those interactions, like that, those interactions with people is what really, and I can't find that um, fulfillment in jobs where I'm just at a computer or at a desk in the same type of way. But it's like, you can't do that. I physically can't do that anymore. So it's like, well, how am I finding that? And again, and it has to change. And I was like, oh, well, I actually have no idea. And I have to be open that I actually have no idea, but know the feeling of what that fulfillment looks like too, for me.
Yeah.
You know?
Um, I have some thoughts about that, but I want to before I do that, I want to ask like what your, is there a spiritual practice or something that you think of as a spiritual practice that you have been leaning on lately or that feels like a really important tool?
I think maybe two things is prayer, in the morning and the evening, and during the middle of the day. But knowing that, like, I, I don't, when my prayer isn't like, I don't hear you know what I mean? Like, I'm not hearing anything come back to me. I'm not I'm just looking for grace for myself, within myself, to go, so that I have as much
Mm-hmm.
grace for myself as I move forward, which we know outside of religion and psychology and all that is like, if we have great, like, what we have towards ourselves is what we dish out to everyone else, right? So reminding,
Yeah.
remembering that. And I think that is like one of the things that's been really helpful, is like remembering that I need, in order to show up the best that I can, so that I can witness whatever it is I'm going to witness on this day, and be the person I want to be, is that I need some quiet where I'm like showing grace for myself and where I am, so that I'm able to see that in other people, or be reminded when they are not showing up at their best, that it's actually just them talking to themselves, you know? So those quiet moments help me
Yeah.
remember that, you know, throughout the day. Um, and then I think just like the practice of like letting things go. And I mean that as in like, yeah, it's stuff I need to let go for sure. But like, we just need to like, sometimes, or a lot of times in this moment too, I think like be a goldfish, you know, just not hold on to all the emotions or the urgency or the things that we are witnessing right now, that is making everyone reactive all over the place all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that like the practice of prayer, right? And like it sounds sort of like centering prayer to me in some ways. That that's like that is required in order to not be
Mm-hmm.
reactive, right? It's not like maybe you can do it in the moment, but I don't think you can do it in the moment of like being not reactive, or not like being able to take a breath and pause, when somebody comes at you, you know, at work, or when there's a headline or it's like having the moment to just be like, okay.
Yeah.
And here we are, like we're back to this moment. That I think until we have that practice on our own, like until we have that practice in, like we practice that in quiet time, right? To lay the
Yeah.
foundation.
Yeah, exactly.
Um,
It gives you the space. And whether that's like meditation, because I also will sometimes meditate in very specific ways with like breath, or um, those two things help, right? Because we can see, we've been around people who don't react with like yelling or meanness or whatever, but that doesn't mean that their silence is extremely reactive to the situation that's happening, right? Or like,
yeah,
which is different than a compassion or a grace for the situation that's happening, right? And so I think one thing that we tend to do is, instead of ground ourselves and find some space between, that we can move in between you and me, or the situation and me, is like, is that compassion as well, right? Like we need to have the compassion for the other person who's not showing up their
yeah,
best as well, right?
yeah, yeah. And I think about compassion as a spiritual practice. Like I think that is,
Right.
the other thing that I was thinking when you were sharing before about what is required when we don't know what's going to happen next. We have to keep taking steps. Like we have to keep moving forward, even though what we thought was going to happen is not happening. And it's like, okay, well, what am I going to do now? That when you were talking about that and like part of your transition now, I was like, oh, that is courage to me. Like, and I like that is like continuing to act in those moments when things are uncertain, and when we might be
Mm-hmm.
afraid, right? It's one thing if something's uncertain, like, you don't know what you're going to eat for dinner, right? It's something else when we're uncertain, like, I mean, I think about the level of uncertainty we're all living in the very
Mm-hmm.
moment, right? On a global scale. Even if, I mean, let's forget what's happening geopolitically,
Yeah.
which is hard to
Yeah.
do. Um, but if we come back to, what we were saying before about environmentalism, right? And like what is happening, like the reality is like we have some predictions about what is going to happen with the climate, but none of us actually know
Mm-hmm.
for sure. And we don't know which of the things that we are changing will have what effect, and that is at its very nature uncertain. And so continuing to show up and work for that, or to make changes, or to have, to take a stand about those things, like, requires that sense of like inner courage of like acting from the heart, right? And I think of it as like acting from a spiritual heart, acting from our values, acting from from who we are. And I think that is like, I have seen you do that over and over again, you know? And that's not easy. That's not easy, but when I found out, like when you first mentioned to me offhand about like praying every morning, I was like, oh, I was like, oh, now I know where that fuel comes
Yeah.
from, right? Because that courage and surrender in our daily action, I think often starts there with like such simple, like quote unquote,
Yeah.
simple practices.
And I think there's also like my dog is also barking out here. I think there is
It's okay.
a difference in, I think a lot of people like and I do as well, is like distract ourselves and disassociate and say that is finding peace or being meditative or something like that. And that's not true, because that doesn't fill you back so that you're able to show up in complicated, difficult moments with grace. And I think one of the things that I think about a lot is that sentence, for the grace, for grace goes I, like,
Yeah.
I have what I have. Who fucking knows why I have the things that I am able to have, right? Like,
Yeah.
it wasn't me. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, I work really hard, all these things, but so does a lot of people who end up homeless or end up in really tough situations that they can't get out of, or there's just like anything can happen in a moment, and so when we're witnessing people fighting and struggling and maybe not using the same language or tone or volume that we do in difficult moments, doesn't mean that we wouldn't be exactly the same situation. So like that's part of what reminds me when I'm just lucky. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's often and it's even like,
I'm gonna grab him for 1 second so he sits up here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Make him happy.
Here you go. He just got a haircut, so he's like,
oh, hi, Betty. I know, I feel this like, oh my gosh, look at this cute little munchkin with his little fluff.
But like, that is part of,
I
think that when you very kindly say like, you see me be courageous, I think my thought is, well, I'm just here, I'm just lucky in this moment to be where I am, and so I just need to move forward in whatever way makes the most sense.
Yeah, just keep moving forward. I love it. Do you have any final thoughts or questions for me?
Well, I mean, I guess I'm interested. You've asked me a bunch of questions, so I'm interested in knowing what is, like, as you're witnessing all of these things happen in the world as well, and in New Orleans, and with your clients, like, what are the practices that you are leaning on?
The practices I'm leaning on I'm like, that one's easier. I was like, the principles are sometimes harder. Yeah, I mean, like, being in some kind of regular conversation with the God of my understanding, which changes like sometimes moment to moment and day to day. I have found lately actually a lot of peace and perspective, doing some genealogical research, not just my own, but learning actually a lot more about New Orleans and like what what that looks like in a human level. And anytime I feel like things are hard, I have now like 1,000 examples of like how much harder.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like just how I think it puts me into an that same like immediate state of gratitude of like I won the birth lottery. Like I am comfortable. I am at ease. So that has been really useful for me. And for me, always, I come back to a singing practice. So I get to sing at the yoga studio, but we do like monthly kirtans, and like there is something about that practice. And it's the same, like, we know all the science, right,
Yeah.
about the vibration and the vagal turning and, releasing oxytocin and serotonin. And I'm like, yeah, and all that stuff is true. And there's something about that practice that really is an anchor for me. Yeah, and really also just taking everything one day at a
Yeah.
time,
So what is a
as much grace as
yeah, yeah.
possible.
So what
Yeah,
is a principle that you're
yeah.
relying on now, if you were?
I know, shit, but it is the hard question, right? It's the hard question. You know, it's so funny, Renee. I'm like, well, the right answer is
Okay, yes.
interconnectedness. That one for me is like very well rehearsed.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's easier to get back to it than it is in other days. Hmm. I mean, there are two that are coming to my mind that are like requirements for me in a lot of ways. And the first is like how we relate to time, because I feel like my sense of time now as a, woman in her 40s is very different than it was when I was
Yeah.
younger. And being able to relate to time as a both linear and cyclical kind of experience. Like, yes, I mean, even just saying, like, I was 20 once and now I'm
Yeah.
not, implies that, like, that happened then and this is now. But first, like, always coming back to, like, this is the only moment that's real.
Yeah.
Like, now is what we have. My whole life is happening in
Yeah.
this moment. And everything else is just, honestly, just a figment of my
Yeah.
imagination.
Yeah.
Right? It's
Absolutely.
either a memory or an
Or
imagination.
hallucination.
The only thing that's actually happening, or a hallucination. Yeah, exactly. The only thing that's real is
Yeah.
right now. And in this moment, like, then anything is
Yeah.
possible. But then also, like, once you've been around long enough, you come back. Like, I'm having a really interesting experience right now of being like, I don't know, I think something's changing in my life. And I have now been through enough changes in my life, right? Like, I've been through enough, like, sort of major transformation and, like, major traumas or, like, my professional life changing or whatever, that I sort of can feel the change happening and I'm not fighting it. I'm just like, okay, well, we'll
Yeah.
see. Right. And it feels so weird, like on this, and so then this is the second principle, which for me is like paradox. And the first example is like exactly what you said it, or we sort of said it together in the beginning. Like, life is really hard and it's really painful and brutal and devastating. And it's also really beautiful and extraordinary and magical. And those two things sound like they are
Yeah.
opposites, but they absolutely exist in the same moment all the time. And so I think I'm sort of living the paradox right now of like the uncertainty of what may or may not be changing in my life, what may or may not be changing in my professional life, going through like a hormonal change and a transition out of like the possibility of motherhood into whatever happens now, right? That's a huge part of this transition. And it is really uncertain. And there's a part of me that's like, it's both very scary and completely peaceful at the same time. And I feel those two things sort of existing like right side by side. And that it's wild. It's wild to like now be in that place where I'm like, yeah, no, okay. We have no idea what's happening. It's completely terrifying, and everything is okay
Yeah.
at the same time. And that feels like what's happening in the world right
Yeah.
now too.
And I think also knowing, I think one of the benefits of being older or having lived whatever number of years is knowing that we are not the first people to experience uncertainty or generation or like, even incredible uncertainty and upheaval that you could not ever imagine, right? Like countries are born and go away, like communities are born and go away. Like that's the story. So like we're not even special, right? This urgency, this difficultness, we're not even special in that. It's already happened to other people before us. We just don't know it. We just don't remember it.
Yeah. Well, and I also think like the gift, and like, I mean, I think there is some inherent like wisdom maybe that comes from living, however long. I actually don't think you can get to your 40s or your 50s and not have experienced some real turmoil. Like whether that's tremendous. I mean, here's the reality. Like all of us lived through something we never could have imagined that was scary and uncertain and devastating, right? During COVID. We had no idea what was about to happen. And so now we're all like, okay, well, we did that, and in New Orleans, there was Katrina, in the US, in New York, there's 9/11, like in other countries, there is also that like, there's some people, I mean, this is the place where I agree with you. I feel lucky. Like they've been born into that level of uncertainty and it has been that way their whole lives. That's just reality. And so being in a state of like the paradox of being in surrender and courageous action is, like that's all we've got. It's like the only way forward that I know of so far.
Yeah.
So far. Anyway.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I really, it's been everything I hoped for and more. So that's, I found I am really getting, it's a gift to me to be able to have these conversations. I'm really excited for the next season of your podcast to come out. And so I will share that in the show notes for people. Is there anything else that you want to leave the listeners and watchers with?
Yeah, so this next season of Making Good is about this transition of closing the shop and moving on and moving forward and being 45 and moving on and moving forward. And I interview a bunch of people, including yourself, on this season about what really big transitions look like in the middle of it. So right after you've made the decision and before the next, before the rescue happens.
In the mess, right? In the mess.
So, so that should come out hopefully by the end of the summer of 25, in the next few weeks. And I mean, I think like if I want to leave with a few words would be that let's face whatever situation that comes up or interactions come up with as much grace and compassion as possible, and like for me, the lesson in those really, really difficult interactions with people who are not showing up as their best self in that moment is us to show up as our best self, regardless. I feel like
Yeah.
that's kind of what we are all trying to get to as witnessing what's happening in the world, but it's just a big struggle. And so I hope that whatever practices you have to help you do that, to lean on them as we kind of see what happens over the next few years.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Renee.
Thank you. Thanks.